Welcome, everyone. How are you all feeling? Lewis is ready to rock and roll over here. Yeah, this evening may be a particularly intense sharing, so I'm asking you to feel rather than think much of what I'm attempting to share tonight. We are in the middle of the celebration of the Wesak full moon. Anyone here follow the Buddhist path? Somewhat. So what does Wesak represent to you?
Well, it's the 3 minutes that the Buddha comes to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Opens the heart.
And the rest of the time he's partying upstairs, huh?
Yeah. A little more remote.
Humans are only worth 3 minutes of his time.
He's got a lot of
that's enough.
territory.
I'm back, going back home. Yeah, at my last talk we addressed the Good Friday death resurrection of what's commonly known as the Christ mystery. So this month today we are in the middle of the portal of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. And the Taurus Scorpio axis, which celebrates the Buddha's incarnation and illumination, is the life and death axis. Taurus being the incarnational portal, and Scorpio being the excarnational portal. So the Taurus Wesak full moon, being in Scorpio earlier today, emphasizes that polarity between the experience of incarnation. Siddhartha Gautama was born into an Edenic environment. Are you all familiar with the story of the Buddha? Mm-hmm. Siddhartha was a prince, and he was born into this beautiful princely environment, protected from the outside world. That's Taurus. And at some point, he said, I cannot be protected in this, I cannot live my life in this protected environment any longer. I need to leave the palace gates and experience the realm of the mortal. He'd heard rumors about people dying, but he'd never seen or experienced it before. That's the Scorpionic axis, the counterpoint to Taurus. So he was so shocked by what he experienced, because in those days we didn't have Social Security and welfare, and the common people were pretty much exposed to the elements, life and death experience, the mortal world. So in meditating upon this drive toward enlightenment, I said, what could be so profoundly impactful in Siddhartha's life that would drive him toward this path of illumination? So the Buddha, as soon as he walked outside of those palace gates, he left Eden. He was no longer a very happy camper. He was like struck suddenly by the challenge of the mortal world, the Scorpionic experience, the portal of death. In shamanic terms, there's a certain movement called meeting death. And in meeting death, you awaken to the power of the immortal soul. And you're driven into the core of your being to make contact with the immortality of your own being. That was the Buddha's path, his quest. He went to the extreme, into extreme asceticism, and found that that didn't really lead him to the path of the enlightened illumination, the peace within that he was seeking. So during this period of time, just as the Christ met his own immortality, the Buddha was seeking to meet his own. And yet the evolution of Uranus in Taurus now is asking us to take another look at our relationship to the incarnational world, to our mortal selves, and recognize the beauty inherent within. throughout our patriarchal history, we have created religions that deny the body's soul. The unihi pili, as the Hawaiian shamans would call it. These religions then have taken hold as a form of apparent spirituality that transcends the body in one form or another. In the Christian world, they deny the body. In the Buddha or Hindu world, they seek to transcend the body and ascend to the higher chakras. The Muslim world has this particular hostile relationship to women. In general, I'm not speaking of all Muslims. But the female power embodied in the incarnational world, the beauty way, is the balance to the patriarchal dominance of world religions that has been denied throughout our history. So we're at a particular juncture, and I was wondering what would surface in May as a demonstration of the consequence of hundreds of thousands of years of patriarchally dominant religion. Have any of you been following the news? Yeah. Well, some of you are aware of these draconic anti-abortion laws that have been passed by 22 states. This was the real reason that the religious right pushed Donald Trump into office. They don't care about what he does. They were looking at the Supreme Court and the stacking of hundreds of federal judges in the courts to promote their agenda of patriarchal worldview, then legislated upon the American people as an example to the rest of the world. So this is particularly emotional for me and for many women, because it does strike at the heart. This is not about abortion. This is about the empowerment of women, the right for women to be personally empowered to make choices over life and death. So regardless of your political leaning, this is a real core issue emotionally about our recognizing the right of the female to ascend to the place of power, being able to choose within their own world what is right for them. And what kind of drove the nail in the coffin for me is there were 25 white legislators that passed this bill in Alabama, and then a female governor, the governor of Alabama is female, she signed it into law. Okay, so that was like, whoa, what is going on here? So many times the catalyst for awakening, it takes an extreme form. It really creates a reality that we can no longer ignore or set aside, that we then need to personally address and rise to the challenge. Adding to that, we also had, earlier today, we had a Venus conjunct Uranus. And that was at 9:16 a.m. this morning. And when a particular planet makes a conjunction with another planet, it sets in motion a cycle. These are called synods, a synodic cycle. This synodic cycle will last through March of 2019. This is particularly powerful because Venus is the ruler of Taurus. Venus is Uranus' guide in Taurus, while he's in Taurus for the next 7 years. So each time that Venus conjuncts Uranus, it creates a chart or sets a tone for the next phase of that Uranian awakening, which began early this morning at about 4 degrees of Taurus. So wherever 4 degrees of Taurus falls in your charts, that is a key to your taking part in the evolution of the feminine in this next phase of awakening. because whenever Uranus is involved, we're dealing with our own radical awakening. I associate Taurus particularly with and Venus with the beauty way, the way of beauty. Beauty is the way through which the feminine heals. The last time Uranus was in Taurus was in the mid 30s, 1930s to the early 1940s. And as I mentioned before, this was the time in which FDR passed the New Deal. And what I didn't realize at the time was that the artists played a big role in modeling this new way of distributing wealth in a conscious and purposeful way. Venus and Uranus is always related to right relationship to our bodies, to our living in this physical world. The Sun is also conjunct Sedna in this chart at 27 degrees of Taurus. Sedna was a living example, a mythological example of the abuse of the feminine by the patriarchal. And she came to a point where the physical world around her was so harsh that she decided to leave the physical world and the land world and dive into the oceans and become a dolphin and whale. So she got so disappointed with her experience in the established world that she left that world and dove into the oceans to her own emotional depth and took her power. She's Inuit by nature, and then she became the goddess of the ocean, the goddess of the sea, and took her own power, but in leaving the physically dominant social culture that she was a part of. So I'm going into this to some depth because some of you, particularly women, may be feeling like heading for the hills or just diving into the ocean, disappearing and becoming a whale or dolphin. Because the intensity level is building. What adds to that is that Mars has just entered Cancer. And Mars looks to the moon as his guide, and the moon in this chart is in Scorpio, flying into the full moon because it happened earlier today with the full moon occurring a few hours later. And interestingly enough, the moon in the Venus-Uranus conjunction chart is exactly conjunct the ascendant of the discovery chart of Sedna. So it ties right into that mythology. So how are you women doing? You feeling like diving into the ocean and becoming whales or dolphins?
I just found yesterday that I had such a strange day. It was like I really felt the energy of Venus and Uranus. I was just like, I could not settle all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And Uranus has had that effect on me previously, and I was just like, could not relax all day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I assumed that was the Uranus-Venus
Yeah.
thing.
Mm-hmm. Because Uranus is actually in its fall in Taurus. It's exalted in Scorpio. Because Venus in Taurus especially stabilizes us into the physical world. And the way she does that is by creating beauty. If you want to fully incarnate into this world, beauty is what draws your spirit into physical incarnation. The more beautiful, the more you enjoy your experience here in your body, the more your spirit will want to come home and fully inhabit her. But Uranus is connected to the next level beyond the physical world, the astral plane, where everything is highly electric and vibrating at a high frequency. So Uranus and Taurus can leave you feeling like you're living in an earthquake zone, where nothing is quite solid and you never can quite find your footing. You can't find solid ground. Uranus and Taurus is like the pressure that builds up along the tectonic plates. And when there's no movement there, they get stuck, and the pressure builds. And that sudden release of pressure is Uranus in Taurus, where you have the release of that energy and the plates then move again into proper alignment. So that pressure that you're feeling can be that kind of stuck energy that wants to move, but it can't quite move because the pressure is not built to a proper level where it can release, and then it suddenly releases. But it does leave you feeling that you're not quite able to settle down and find your rhythm. You know? And so that's the next 7 years.
So how do we handle that?
So just we've all been handling that living in California, knowing that the ground could shake at any moment, and that, you know, not to be too surprised when it does, and realize that we have the ability to re-anchor at a higher frequency each time the Earth moves. You know? So this can reflect into your physical lives as wondering about making a living and how you're going to establish some kind of rhythm in your life that affords you some level of security, of comfort. So at the higher level, once you connect to your immortal soul, you realize that there's a greater intelligence guiding you to new and more ingenious ways of connecting, particularly with Uranus, with the community, through the gifting economy, to manifest a whole new way of moving energy through the community so that it can circulate not just to you and stay with you, but circulate through you and around you through the entire community, so it circulates rather than gets piled up in the corner as being quote unquote wealthy. You know, wealthy people have to pile all that stuff up in the corner because they don't trust other people. They don't trust their connections to the community around them to support them. So they have to have plenty in the bank to be able to support themselves because they don't trust their relationships to the community at large. And that leaves them in a very isolated position. But Uranus and Taurus is saying that the only resolution to our abundance is through the gifting economy, through sharing what we have with one another and creating those viable relationships to others of our own kind. So the act of beauty in giving is what opens doors to participation with the community and in the lives of others. So if you're feeling insecure about what you're receiving, turn that around on yourself and start giving. And this can be in small ways, just giving a hug or a smile or, you know, a flower. They don't have to be, you know, grand gestures. But it's getting the energy, rather than being stuck on how you're pulling it toward you, moving the energy through you outward toward others. And it'll completely reverse the energetic field that you're participating in. You're always looking for opportunities to share more of yourself with others in need. And you'll notice that by your doing so, that it naturally opens the door for whatever you need in return to flow back to you. So being isolated or hunkering down can increase your feeling of being insecure and unstable rather than being connected to the energy of the community. So Mars in Cancer, looking to the Moon in Scorpio here, this whole period of time through June may be a very emotional time. And this whole issue of the abortion issue has surfaced as a shamanic tool, an initiatic tool, on a deeply emotional level to get clear about, particularly women here, how to empower yourself in having the right to decide over life and death issues without getting drawn into the drama, reacting toward those who have fallen asleep as your enemy. So I'm really curious to see how the women rise now and face this opportunity as a constructive opportunity to organize themselves and empower themselves to have their voices heard. Yeah, I got a message in the dream time, process the core. And that's all it would say. That's all it has said. So this is a time to process the core and then follow it. This was the other part of that phrase. This drives us into the core intent, our emotional foundation, where we sit and feel how we can claim our comfort zone in the midst of turmoil, and realize how we are emotionally connected one to another. The moon just went into Sagittarius about an hour ago, so at least we can talk about this now. But the earlier part of the day, I don't know how many of you felt like wanting just to disappear and hide in a cave somewhere. But the last couple of days have been quite intense and challenging. The Venus conjunct Uranus chart also has Cancer rising, so the entire period of time until March of next year may involve the processing of these deep emotions, so that women can then increasingly find their power and rise as a collective tribe to make their voices heard and known, and not be denied the right to choose over life and death issues. So how many of you have been following the Sunrise Movement and Ocasio-Cortez and the women, particularly the young women who are organizing, Naomi Watts, who are organizing around these issues to gather together as a movement to empower women to have their voices heard. And so this may be a part of the awakening that each of you here can participate in, where you're not alone in this. So are there any questions at this point?
I noticed that Aries is 23 degrees Aries as well. The whole the female energies square all that Capricorn energy.
Yeah. The Eris is a newly discovered planet, about the same size as Pluto, that is being squared by Pluto as we speak, and Pluto's applying to that square through the next few years. That's the activation of the radical feminine. But that's been going on since most of our lifetimes. Eris has been in Aries since 1927. So that's the one planet that actually we all have in common. All of us here have Eris and Aries. So that's the unifying field of the rise of the feminine.
It's exact 23 now.
Mm-hmm.
Mars in Cancer, I always took it as a challenging time.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
Bursts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mars has its most difficult time in the sign of Cancer, because Mars is our ability to be authentic in what we want, our drive to realize our own needs. And yet Cancer, the mother power, she is concerned primarily with the needs of others. So Mars and Cancer is the sign of the mother, but it also can rhyme with smother. So Mars can feel smothered in Cancer. This is some mothers find themselves taking care of everyone else before they can have their own needs met, and not realizing that they're seeking to have their own needs met through satisfying or taking care emotionally of the needs of others, so they can have their own sense of purpose, their own needs met. But that can only go so far until the mother wakes up one day and says, I had enough of this, and she kind of blows up. And that's the Mars in Cancer steam that Mars has a reputation for experiencing. So when Mars is in Cancer, we need to be very honest about not overextending ourselves and caring for others as a way of having our own needs met, and that not having that return in like kind, because then we can feel that we've been taken advantage of. But Mars is always about us, our own divine selfish need to honor self. So Mars in Cancer needs to honor self by nurturing herself as well, and not feeling that the only way she can feel comfortable, Cancer, is by taking care of the needs of others so that they feel comfortable. So Mom can't settle down until everyone else is taken care of because she's so empathically tied to the emotions of others. This is one of the key dark sides of the healing path, where we're motivated to heal others because we feel they're suffering. So you don't realize that you actually have a personal agenda in healing the suffering of others. In other words, healing the suffering of others allows you to feel okay because you're so emotionally empath with them. So one of the breakthroughs that healers have is not being so empathically bound up in the suffering of others, so they can offer that ability to heal cleanly and not be so tied into the hidden agenda of not being able to feel okay until everyone else feels okay around them. Mars in Cancer tends to emphasize that issue, and this will be pretty much dominant throughout June. So the wildness of this particular movement that just suddenly surfaced with these anti-abortion bills is connected with Mars being out of bounds. He's beyond the bounds of the norm. So that when Mars is out of bounds, there tends to be radical out of bounds initiatives that then gradually need to come back into bounds, into the confines of what's really acceptable and reasonable. By through June 12th, Mars is out of bounds. So this is kind of the radical Mars in Cancer, because Mars in Cancer can feel like the womb is under attack. Mars rules metal and the yang assertive energy invading Cancer, the womb. So this whole issue is being brought to the surface so it can be seen clearly, understood, and healed. And women in particular can take their power and form right relationship to these life and death decisions. I think women have had enough with the thousands of years of male arrogance, and this may be the tipping point that really we cannot be silenced any longer. I'm personally kind of really deeply disturbed by this move, by what's just occurred right now, and embarrassed by the arrogance of these white men. It just has to stop. And sometimes the universe works in ways that really push us to the brink before we realize that we cannot proceed any further in a certain direction. And this is like the breaking point. By early July, then Mars enters Leo. And it's usually the first week or two of Mars in Cancer that is the most challenging, because Mars is still trying to find its bearings in this hypersensitive zone of emotional sensitivity. What adds to that is that Mercury is in his own sign now. Will enter his own sign, Gemini, on the 21st with the Sun energy Gemini, and then the Sun conjunct Mercury on Tuesday the 21st, early in the morning. And we do then have the opportunity to start languaging a lot of what we're feeling now. That's why I'm having a little challenging time finding the right language. But lots of understanding then will begin to flow as we start talking about and communicating these issues more consciously. And then on the 4th of June, then Mercury also enters Cancer, the sign of Cancer. Venus will have entered Gemini on the 8th of June. And these all tie more deeply into the lunar current. The lunar current is becoming more and more dominant, particularly after the first and second week of June. And then the Sun enters Cancer on the 21st of June, the summer solstice, 8:54 in the morning, continuing the lunar emphasis. So this lunar emphasis won't really be lightening up somewhat until the beginning of July, when Mars enters Leo. Mercury will have entered Leo, and Venus will then also enter Cancer in early July. So this is a highly emotional time for us to form a right relationship to our physical experience here on planet Earth. The way in which we can find resolution, healing, and liberation through this period of time is by being an active agent of beauty in the world. Where there is ugliness in the world, you bring beauty. This is not just physical beauty, it's actually inner beauty, where you seek to beautify and uplift others around you through acts of beauty. This will counteract the ugliness in the world that we're seeing presently dominating in many sectors of our own country. And women have that extraordinary power to bring beauty into the world as a path, as a way, as an act of power. So that's the way in which we can counteract what we see as disappointing in the human race at this point, is by an artful demonstration of the beauty way in our own being. And Venus and Taurus through the beginning of July is certainly an opportunity. See, Venus stays in Taurus until the beginning of June 8th, she enters Gemini. So from now until then, it's a beautiful opportunity to recommit ourselves to the way of beauty. The new moon occurs on June 3rd at 12.5 degrees of Gemini, and then the full moon on the 17th of June at about 26 degrees of Sagittarius. The period around the full moon, with Jupiter squaring Neptune on the 16th, the day before the full moon, Mercury conjunct Mars on the 18th of June, and then Mercury opposing Pluto, Mars opposing Pluto on the 19th, on the same day. Mars will have opposed Saturn on the 14th of June. So from the middle of June through the third week of June, we have the culmination of all the teachings we've received around being emotionally healthy and connected to the depth of ourselves, particularly the women here in the room, to counteract the male dominant patriarchal powers that are seeking to rise and take control. And this is like the last gasp of this particular phase of human history demonstrating itself, coming out in the open so we can clearly understand its nature. But I feel like from this point onward, the women will not stand for it any longer. And we as men can really support them and recognize the opportunity to make that shift within ourselves so that we don't unconsciously participate in that old paradigm. So how are you women feeling? I mean, aside from hearing that news. Go ahead.
I wanted to share just a short story. Well, one day I was working in a garden in a farm field,
Mm-hmm.
and there was these sweet peas that were in rows.
Can you come up closer so we can hear you?
time I was in a garden, and there was this rows of sweet peas, and they were just this little, like little children. But around the peas, there was weeds growing. So I spent all day pulling those weeds and singing to those plants. And the plants were communicating to me. And as I traveled into their realm and decided to leave this realm that was this, as far as I was concerned, was a man-made dogmatic world. And the plants said to me, if you help us not to be choked, we will give you a gift in return. And I said to them, what gift is that? And they said, you will see in July or August as we climb up, we will give you sweet peas to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I have realized that love is a sharing. It's not just a female from the old world giving, 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 and being so drained. There's this beautiful communion that we have with nature that can teach us a beautiful form of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak for a lot of women that have come into my life, we're tired. We're just tired of giving and giving and giving and giving and being treated like shit after we're done.
Mm-hmm.
The time has come that we need to be respect ourselves, not to expect it from anybody, but to love thyself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
story from the true sweet peas.
That's a beautiful in alignment with the timing of the transits too.
Yeah.
Because if we, give ourselves to impeccably to the task in hand, like doing, preventing that which is growing in our garden from being choked during these couple months, it will start bearing fruit in July and August, just like the garden will. So if there's any doubt about the right way to proceed, just get your hands dirty in the garden and do some weeding. And the Uranus and Taurus is the period of pagan revival of the pagan ways. Because you look throughout most of the world's religions, they're all patriarchal, and they've all driven the pagan way of honoring the goddess underground. But that's not surfacing back into the public view, just like it did in the 30s with the revival in Germany, especially of the worship of nature. Is anyone aware of what was going on in Germany in the 30s?
They
With
were
the
not in Europe.
Yeah, with the revival of the old gods. It was a pagan revival. That was the last time Uranus was in Taurus. And they replaced the religious iconography with the forest. And they remodeled their entire culture upon the ideal of living in the forest in harmony with nature. And they restored the Olympics in 1936 during that period of time, which was an acknowledgement of the beauty of the physical body. Taurus is the physical body, our incarnation. So this whole revival was going on that the Nazis eventually co-opted, because it was the first creation of the modern film industry also, but it was used for propaganda. But in the process, they created a whole new art form, Uranus and Taurus. So this pagan revival is like recurring now again, with high technology being a support possibly to the creation of whole new art forms. But the real models will be presented by I kept seeing Burning Man, these different ways of recreating these imaginal worlds in the physical, rather than just having to go to the movie theater to see it. It's actually being done in the physical world. Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, and Venus are all in their own signs now. So this is like going to, has anyone ever been to a Burning Man festival?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have all these different places you can go. They're all like separate from one another. And they each have their own particular creative quality, but they're not mingled with one another. Like you can go from one to the other. This is kind of like Burning Man with all these different venues you can go to and participate in. And we may feel somewhat scattered by it, that we have to choose which of those venues we want to party at for a period of time. But that's kind of the phase we're in right now. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And so I'm personally committing to not taking anything personally during this period of time, because I realize that everyone is experiencing a period of heightened emotional sensitivity. And we can easily find ourselves reacting rather than acting with clarity around the depth of the emotions that are brought up during this period of time, for us to clearly see, understand, and then recognize the beauty or gift within. Okay? Anyone else? Well, unless there are any other comments or questions, I think we did it for the night.